Between the Veil by A.G. Kross. Esha Sievers was free-falling through the sky, the wind whipping at her face as she tore through the clouds, no parachute and no safety protocols. Her HUD blinked with rapid calculations, feeding her velocity, altitude, and the distance to her target below. None of it mattered now. She'd chosen the drop. She'd chosen the risk. Araxis spread out beneath her in a dizzying expanse of blackened towers and neon haze, the city's massive alloy spires shimmering like shards of broken glass under the pulse of artificial sunlight. Ahead, the spiraling descent route lit up in her visor, but it was almost impossible to control her fall as she weaved through gusts of atmospheric interference. Another wave of wind hammered into her, and she spun, narrowly grazing a comms tower before stabilizing with a jolt from her thruster boots. Her earpiece crackled.
Voss, are you reading me?
Esha gritted her teeth.
Still reading you, Yen. Just enjoying the scenic route.
Scenic? You're 200 meters off target.
Relax. I'll hit it.
She adjusted her trajectory, shifting her weight until the flashing beacon of the Accord facility loomed below. Down there, nestled among the sleek city structures, lay the Veil device, a device capable of rewiring entire timelines, warping reality to the whims of those who controlled it. If she failed, it wouldn't be just Araxis under threat. The entire galaxy would bow to the Accord's unrelenting grip. Her velocity increased as she angled herself into a sharper descent. 50 meters, then 20. Alarms blared across her HUD as her boots activated, cushioning her at the last possible second with a bone-jarring impact that left hairline fractures in the ferrosteel platform. She stood, barely managing to keep her balance, and unclipped the thruster pack, casting it aside as she drew her sidearm. The rooftop was already swarming with guards, temporals, clad in reflective black armor that gleamed even in the dim light, their faces hidden beneath faceless helmets. They didn't hesitate. The closest guard lunged forward and she fired, a single shot straight through the visor.
Sorry.
She stepped over the body as she ran toward the sealed entrance. Her fingers flew across the control panel, disabling the initial security layers while keeping her eyes on the movements behind her. The temporals were regrouping, their visors flickering as they recalibrated. She could practically feel the countdown ticking away.
They're scrambling reinforcements from all nearby sectors. If you're going to reach the lab, you have to move now.
Yeah? Tell that to them.
She gestured absently to the squad racing toward her, firing synchronized pulses that whizzed past her. She dropped, rolling beneath one of the volleys, before diving into the open hatch, just as it hissed shut behind her. The muffled thud of blaster shots against the door was her final farewell to the rooftop above. The corridor was dark, save for the emergency lights casting an eerie red glow along the narrow space. Esha swept her gun in front of her, senses alert, pulse pounding in her ears. The Veil device was located 3 levels below, and she had maybe 10 minutes, if she was lucky, before the Accord pinpointed her location. She moved fast, her steps echoing in the empty hall. Each sound was a reminder of the trap she was setting foot into, but she kept her thoughts focused. She'd been training for this her entire life, even if she hadn't known it. Each leap, every locked corridor, each patrol she bypassed, they were all patterns. Breakable, predictable patterns. She reached a blast door, tapping into the console. Just as her fingers grazed the controls, a shrill alarm erupted, and her earpiece crackled.
Esha, they've isolated your signal. You're out of time.
Yen's voice was strained, almost drowned by static.
I'm not finished.
Her fingers were flying as she bypassed layer after layer of security. It didn't matter how many alarms she set off now. The door slid open with a final, grudging groan, revealing the Veil device, a core of polished alloy covered in intricate etchings, rings upon rings of impossible circuitry. In a different world, she might have admired its beauty, its artistry, but she knew what it was, a weapon of unthinkable potential. She stepped forward, but a familiar hum halted her mid-stride. The door behind her slid open again, and Admiral Rhine walked in, his sharp eyes appraising her with clinical detachment. His silver hair, cropped close to his scalp, and the narrow line of his mouth lent him a cold, deadly elegance.
Captain Sievers, I was hoping you'd come to your senses, but I suppose I expected too much.
Esha squared her shoulders, gripping her sidearm tighter.
Funny you should call me that. I thought the Accord would have done better than to let me slip through their fingers.
Ryan's gaze narrowed.
We let you in, Captain. You think we're blind? You think we don't know why you're here?
Her heart thundered, but she kept her face impassive.
I think you're arrogant enough to believe you should control time itself.
Ryan's expression didn't change, but his eyes were ice cold.
Perhaps. But you
He inclined his head, almost pitying.
are nothing more than a remnant, a leftover of a world that doesn't understand its own obsolescence.
Esha felt the words pierce her, but she didn't flinch. Her father's words echoed in her mind. All those nights he'd warned her, trained her, prepared her for a moment she hadn't yet understood.
You didn't understand him, and you don't know me.
Esha edged toward the veil device, her gaze scanning its intricate rings and etchings. It was her father's legacy, the culmination of years spent in defiance, his life's work reduced to this hidden weapon. She'd come here to retrieve it, to take it from the Accord and safeguard it herself, anything but leave it in their hands. But as she heard Ryan's footsteps close in behind her, blocking the only exit, her options evaporated.
Back away, Captain.
She had moments, maybe less.
The Accord can be merciful. They've agreed to be lenient. You just need to surrender to me.
Esha tightened her grip on her sidearm. The veil device pulsed softly in front of her, a subtle hum that seemed to sync with her own heartbeat. Her mind was racing now.
They'll use it to rewrite history to suit the Accord's iron-fisted rule, and every lost future, every erased life would be on me.
Your mission failed, Aaron,
Rain was still inching forward.
and that device belongs to the Accord. There's no chance you will leave here with it.
She laughed softly, defiance bleeding into desperation.
The Accord has taken everything from me, Ryan.
In one swift move, she aimed her gun, firing multiple shots at the veil device's power core. Alarms blared, and the room's atmosphere shifted, a low rumble starting from deep within the machine. Ryan's composure cracked as his expression turned to horror, his face twisting in fury.
No! You've killed us both! You fool!
His shout was barely audible over the rising crescendo of the machine, its powerful hum growing until it was all she could hear. She dove against a wall, bracing herself as the core began to destabilize, the device's rings spinning erratically as the machinery rebelled against itself. The space was a blur of light and sound as the core neared critical mass, pulses of time-warping energy bursting from its center.
Esha, get out of there.
Ryan had staggered back, eyes wide opened, and for a moment, he seemed frozen, torn between anger and disbelief. His mouth began to move furiously as he tapped frantically at his comm device, shouting words swallowed by the chaos. His eyes darted between Esha and the device. With a strained motion, he raised his arm, gesturing wildly toward the doorway before he began stumbling toward it himself. Esha shimmied against the wall to the doorway, her vision doubling as the energy waves distorted reality itself, freezing and accelerating fragments of time all around her. A storm of energy burst out, enveloping her in a flood of light and sound that tore through her senses, making her feel like she was being ripped from her very bones. She was everywhere and nowhere at once. Ryan's figure jolted in and out of sync as he fought to keep his balance amidst the distortion. His form began to waver, ghost-like, his outstretched hand phasing in and out of existence. He let out a silent scream as the final explosion rocked the facility, his form fracturing, scattered into fragments of light. The shockwave of chronal energy sent her hurtling out through the open doorway into the corridor. Then, darkness. She didn't know how long she lay there, her ears ringing, her head a whirlwind of fragments and broken images. But when she opened her eyes, everything was different. She lay on cold, dewy grass under a starlit sky. The buildings, the alarms, the shattered lab, they were gone, replaced by the open, hushed vastness of an alien landscape. The air was still, her breaths loud in the silence. Rising slowly, she looked around, heart pounding as she tried to orient herself. The stars overhead were strange, bright but scattered in unfamiliar constellations. There were no signs of life, only the distant echo of wind howling across a vast, empty field. Her HUD flickered, failing to place her location, her comms silent. Time itself felt wrong, stretched thin, like she was moving through layers of memories that didn't belong to her. She touched her side, reaching for the familiar weight of her sidearm, but the weapon was lost in the chaos. She staggered forward, every step like trudging through heavy water. She didn't know how long she'd been there, hours or perhaps days. Her sense of time was slipping, warping. Visions flickered across her mind, scenes of herself as a child, memories of her father, fragments of battles she hadn't fought. They twisted and shifted, melting into one another, blurring the line between past and future until she couldn't tell which was which. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the time warping ceased. She felt a lurch, as though being yanked through a narrow tunnel, and with a jolt, she landed back in the corridor, sprawled on the ground beside the now destroyed veil device. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, and the world gradually sharpened back into focus, the metallic scent of scorched circuitry stinging her nose. She forced herself upright, clutching a bleeding wound on her shoulder, still feeling echoes of that other place, that other time. Her earpiece crackled back to life with Yen's frantic voice.
Esha, are you there? The whole facility. What happened?
Her throat was raw, but she managed a hoarse reply.
I couldn't stop. It took me somewhere. Or when?
She shuddered, the memory of that silent, timeless field still lingering. The veil device lay in ruins, sparking weakly, its once gleaming core now a mangled, charred mass.
You vanished from the signal for several minutes. We thought...
Yen, the veil is gone.
A pause crackled over the comms, then a quiet sigh of relief.
Copy that. But you have to get out of there. They're sending reinforcements.
Esha grabbed what she could from the wrecked core, salvaging a few scorched fragments that might hold traces of its data. As she turned to leave, her gaze fell on Admiral Ryan's body, sprawled against the wall, his uniform and skin shredded, his face frozen in a final grimace. She smiled grimly.
Let's not make it too easy for them.
Understood.
She slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the twisting corridors of the Accord facility, ready for whatever would come next. Thank you for listening to this snippet from Between the Veils by A.G. Kross, our first upload on the channel. Let us know in the comments what you think of the story so far. Share your thoughts on the characters, the pacing, and where you think the plot will go from here. And don't forget to subscribe and like for more original stories from the edges of reality. Your support means everything as we explore new worlds together. See you in the next story.